Okay, hi everyone. We're going to officially open our panel session. Thanks again for joining us this morning. And the name of this panel, our introductory panel, is Ways of Seeing. We love opening our gathering with a panel that invites people to deeply think about our art and our profession. And so this panel is actually based on, I guess, inspired by a well-known essay called Ways of Seeing by John Berger from the 70s. And he is a thinker and a poet and a writer. And he was just trying to think of ways in which Western art gets communicated and what it means to see and how our seeing is affected by society's conditioning. And so we're going to start on a little bit of a philosophical note this morning. And for me personally, I'm always intrigued by how originally when we read the script, what are those instinctual images that come to our mind and where do they come from? And how the subconscious is connected to the influences that we've had through our lives. And so I've invited Christian, Diana, and Akin to chat with me about that. We have some questions prepared, but we're probably gonna go a little bit off script. And as a form of a alternative introduction, I guess I'm going to ask the panelists to share with us some early memory, either childhood or something from their upbringing that they feel is connected to their visual world and has affected some of their design decisions later on. So I know it's a deep question. Maybe I'll start with Christian.
Well, for me, for sure, one of the first memories of space was my parents' house, and my father was an architect, and he planned it, and it was complete mid-century, so very, very clear lines. Everything was open. There was always a lot of light, very little clutter. Till then my mom came in and started messing it all up. And suddenly there was a big sofa in the living room with parrot pattern on it. And that influence became bigger and bigger and bigger. And I guess that I didn't like that much. And so I think, yeah, that was one of the earliest influences is, I think, clarity, order, and organization.
Hello. Thank you, Inbal, for inviting me here to share this. It's very deep. I'm very emotional of being here. When you asked me to be here about talking about ways of seeing, I started thinking about what we see is not necessarily like what we see. No, it's like a connection between what you're looking at and yourself. So I remember talking to you the first time. I have this image that is imprinted in my brain since very early. I think it was like my whole childhood, but since I was 5, I remember this object that is my grandmother's apron. The color, the pattern, it was like a native textile, like almost like a shipibo manta. And the contrast over her flower dresses. But I think the reason that is imprinted in my brain is because she was always cooking in her kitchen with wood panels in the 70s in Colombia, 80s, sorry. I mean 70s, 80s. And what you see is connected to emotions. I remember the smell of her food. I remember if I was 5 or 6, it was like everything, like every time it was in front of me, like this apron. And in this kitchen, and like it reminds me of home. It reminds me of who I am. And I think I always bring this apron to my work, kind of. Something in this kitchen, this connection of my past, of my childhood, has always been present as what I saved in my brain.
Interestingly, I think mine is similar-ish. When I was a kid, I had a baby blanket, and when I was very young, the way I would refer to it was buta, give me the buta. And for comfort, I would take this blanket that had this beautiful plaid pattern on it, and I would rub it against my face, and it made me feel safe and secure. And then it slowly started to deteriorate, and it was just pieces of cotton, and I'd call it buta. And then my mother, every time she'd open a vitamin box, there was this little cotton. So years after, the blanket had been thrown out secretly in the middle of the night while I slept so I wouldn't weep. She'd give me the cotton from the vitamin jars, and I'd be satiated and happy and say buta and rub it against my face. And then fast forward, I got very sick, and I went to the doctor, and the doctor looked into my nose and said, "Oh my God," and put these tweezers in my nose, and he pulled out this green, nasty thing, which was my buta. So I have to imagine at some point, for comfort, I must have needed comforting deep inside my head. But I think that speaks to what I find important, which is that touch and that action and how you get to the strange occurrence, but started with something that we all recognize. And so for me, it's not just the guy that has the sickness in his head. It's knowing that the sickness came from this deep intimacy and this moment of comfort that was once the blanket, that was once buta.
Beautiful. I'll just share my story. That I always joke that almost every one of my sets at the end of the day refers to my great aunt's apartment in Vienna. And so I grew up in Israel, but my family, my grandma was the only one that immigrated to Israel after the war, and then my family ended up in Vienna. And so when I was a kid, we would always be going on vacations to my great aunts in Vienna, and as opposed to like the kind of rough, wild upbringing in Israel, which has like no design history or style, we would get to Vienna and we would just be so mesmerized by the elegance and the thought in every architectural detail. So my great aunt's apartment was almost like a temple for me. And even today when I look at it, it's really just like a kind of mediocre 1970s apartment in Vienna, but to me it's still like a shrine. And I think that some of that returns in some of the patterns and the colors that I pick in my sets when I think about it really deeply. Anyway, so as a follow-up question, these are very deep childhood memories, but when you think about your upbringing, your education, things you learned in school or experiences that you've had in your life, what are other influences that you think make up your visual vocabulary? Diana, maybe I'll start with you and your school education experience.
So, yeah, back in Colombia, growing up in Bogota, I was lucky enough, I think opportunity and the opportunity that you're given for a good education is also going to be like what is going to educate your eye. I remember my teacher, Rita, she was the librarian and the art teacher. And very young, I remember she started like talking about beauty and what it was beautiful and what it was beauty and what was art and and it was always connected to perfection. She was always talking about that the Bernini's David was better than the Michelangelo's David, and actually then I went to Florence and I think I agree with her. But she was talking about the Botticelli Venus and all the time like putting us these very like aspirational images of perfection. But then luckily I had my father that was always telling us about beauty in nature, taking us to the Gold Museum to learn about our history, our heritage, before the Spaniards came to colonize us, who we were before that. So I think I always had this mix of things, like these two layers of information. So what you see is like influenced by your mentors, your teachers, but also by your fathers, like this aunt that was always like sending me the best music because she was a teenager when I was a kid. She was the youngest. So I was always sharing, she was always sharing with me dance, music, even art. So all these relationships with, like when you're growing up, it's how you educate your way of seeing, right? Also, I think like a stimuli of like growing up in Colombia, like the cultural time and like the political society where I grew up was also something that impacted the way of seeing. Sometimes, I don't know who I was talking about last night. I remember we had the news all the time because there was, when I was growing up, I remember the TV showing up like all this mess that was happening all the time, and that was like in the back of your mind. So those images compared, like on contrast to the beauty and like the art and like where you're aiming to be, you would like close your eyes a little bit growing up. When like at the actual place, I would like try to avoid all of that information and concentrate of like the beauty that she was telling us, teaching us. And I think that it's been a constant in my life, like trying to avoid, look at what you like, take it in. No, like the first time I remember when I first went to the ocean, it's like the same like with all of us. It's like a horizontal line, like you take it in, you save it, and you don't say what you don't like, but it's imprinted in your brain anyways.
I might be confusing two prompts, but at the same time, it made me think, and maybe this is the appropriate time to say it, because I've been thinking about this for a while, for better or for worse. I was at my friend's house, actually Bradford's house, and he's got this beautiful daughter. She's amazing. And she was doing something, I was like, oh, you're so beautiful, and she really liked that. But I felt like in the sense of saying that to her, I was stealing something at the same time. Because now there's this sense of I like this compliment, so now I must receive it again. And what do I have to do to receive that? So then I felt like, oh, if that was my daughter, I'd have to tell her she's beautiful all the time. But then I thought, well, if I don't tell her brothers they're beautiful all the time, then there would be an inherent competition that I was creating. And then if they go to school and there's other kids and only 3 of them I say they're beautiful, but the other ones I don't, then we're imprinting this competition and expectation. And then the day that you wake up and you aren't told that you're beautiful, you feel bad about yourself. And so because of strikes and all that, I've had this extended period of time in commercials, and again, this comes up all the time, beautiful, we want it to be beautiful, and more I'm like, I don't know what the fuck that means. Because everything is just a story, and what's beautiful to you is not beautiful to someone else. And the other word I fucking hate is aspirational. I was that kid that grew up on Mr. Rogers, which is "You're beautiful just the way you are." So, and so many times that protected me in my life, because when I didn't feel good enough, I would just say that to myself. You're beautiful just the way you are. Don't try to be these other things. Just learn to love yourself. So that became the approach that I would tell these, anybody, kids, anybody, is just be. So more and more when I'm creating, that's the perspective that I have, is that I don't need to embed conflict in this. I don't need to embed aspiration in this. I don't need to do any of that. All I need to know is your connection to it and why that is special. And so that became my definition of beauty. Beauty is just the story that we attach to it. It's not the thing. The thing is aspirational.
Christian?
I mean, basically the first 17 years of my life I spent and grew up in a very, very, very small town in very rural West Germany, and it was a time of no mobile phones and no internet. So it was very common that after lunch, as a kid, you would just sent out by your parents, and they would just say, "Come back when the sun is going down." So I spent basically my entire childhood in nature, and the profoundness of time, looking at nature and basically a lot of times doing nothing. It's kind of influenced the way or the time I need to look at things and observe things, and how a leaf is moving in the wind, or how the sun goes down or up, or a little bug on the ground. So I just like, I think it influenced the time I need to create or form something in my brain. But I was so sick of it when I was 17 that I made as the day after school stopped, I just took my bag and went to Berlin. And it was completely the opposite. The first thing I did in Berlin was I was going in a squatted punk nightclub where basically punks were dancing towards Marvin Gaye, and the mess of it, the diversity of it, the sound of the city, I think just did something to me that I think, okay, there's a whole world out there which I need to discover, and I felt like I have missed out on so many things. I have missed out on so many observations that I think my curiosity then to observe whatever other people do, whatever this chaos is also around me in the big city, it just was followed by really excessive world traveling and looking at everything that there is, and that's what I did for a couple of years. And then I think with all the images that came from there, because then first time I had replicas of what I saw as a photograph. And the ways of seeing For me now, I mean, from my 50-year-old perspective towards the past, is interesting because sometimes I don't know anymore what is coming out of my own memory or what is just coming from the image I once took. And what comes into mind when I design or when I read a script? Is it a profound memory I can rely on? Or is it just an image I once took? Or is it neither of it? Is it just something I saw on the internet, but I'm connecting it to a place I saw and was once observing?
So actually, to follow up on that and take it more into our design process, when you first read a script and you get these instinctual images, which you sort of, in the moment, you can't always explain to yourself where they're coming from, what is the next step, kind of? How do you verify those images, or how do you interact with those initial images, sort of to Christian's point? Diana, do you want to take this one, or Akin? So when you read the script and when you have your first imagery, how do you then take it further? How do you interact with those images, and do you ever scrutinize your own first reactions to say, well, I'm not sure that was the right reaction. It came from myself. It's been conditioned by various things in my upbringing, and perhaps it's not actually connected to the story.
I think, and I feel like this is a constant debate that I have with other creators and myself, because we like to feel intuition, but I also like to question intuition. And the reason is because that first thing you think, oftentimes, in my opinion, is the most common thing. So you have to observe what it is that you're perpetuating. And I'm super sensitive to that, because I think so much of what we do really does perpetuate this capitalistic system. It's like, there's the pain and suffering, there's the conflict, suck it up, the resolution, all these things. We learned about it, the birth of some of those stories when we were here at the Acropolis the last time. And those stories they tell you the rules of the society that you live in. So when you're exporting a material to other societies, you have to observe what the thing you're exporting is, what you're perpetuating, and how dangerous and scary that is. And I mean that in the simplest ways. That seems big, but it's embedded in every little thing. Again, back to that story of the beauty and the compliment, that embedding a competition and a perspective into the simplest discussions with somebody that you love. So I try to self-police. I read the thing, I see certain things, and I try to whittle those things down to feelings. So less about the image, less about the couch, because I recognize that that's maybe my couch that I grew up in, or a variation of it. And I'm looking to recognize all these things from within inside of me, and my perspective is valuable, but it's only one. So then I look for a commonality of feelings, of different, diverse things that represent that same emotion. And maybe that takes a little work, because I have to understand you a little bit to understand why that other couch elicited the same feeling in you. And oftentimes when you step out and you look at yourself, you're like, fuck, I am a capitalist, or I am a colonialist. I am this thing that I purport not to be, but even in the simplest things, I carry that disease, and I touch the thing and force that same story into it. So over and over again, I try to step back, observe what it is that's inciting my feeling, question that, and try to reconnect with whoever that person or that thing is. So to answer your question, yes, I read and I see things. And then I let go of the things that I saw, and I turn them into feelings. And then I look for common stories from different worlds of which express and elicit that same feeling, and try to piece back together that thing of which I should be connected to, but I also want you to feel seen and be connected to.
Yeah, very similar. Of course, when we're reading, we're seeing with our eyes or reading is like there's images, there is visuals, but there is always emotions. Like when you're reading, you're seeing like how imagination works is like you're seeing with your eyes closed. You're like imagining the script. But again, it's always like, this is my perspective. Is this coming from what I've seen in my life? Because it's always like a projection of the library of visual images that you've been saving. So I often do the same. It's like I need like this first feeling. Maybe I thought of an artist, maybe I thought of like a book, but I always try to go to a museum. I think for me it's very important to, as opposed to scrolling and see a lot of images, I want to just go to a museum and stare at something. That is, for me, contemplation is very important before just go and sketch or draft. I am now lucky again because I'm living in Washington, D.C., so I have every sort of, like all of the museums are there, like, and sometimes I'm reading a story that is happening in Bogota, but it's in the 1970s, so I go and see an exhibition about 70s artists, what was happening at that time. So when you're contemplating a piece of art in a museum, it's a different way of research because you're like shorting space and time, and basically you can be there at the studio of the artist and say like, so this is what it was at that moment, and like composition, colors, textures, patterns. You get that, and then you interpreted that, and that's maybe something that is realistic. Maybe that is going to take you to a place or to the period that you're trying to recreate. Because whatever is inside of me, it's going to go through me, but I need to start with a real starting point. And I think, I remember, I like museums because I remember when you couldn't take pictures at museums, right? So you had to really, you stare there, and I love sculptures because you could go around and do a 3D scan of the object that you're looking at to remember it. You were not able to take pictures. So I try to go do that, and it's inhaling all this, whatever is happening there that you like and you're attracted to, stimulation, and then inspiration, then imagination, and then it's we're the scanners, and then we print it, kind of.
I think with my ADS mind, when the mobile phones, they have this LiDAR function, and you can scan the rooms, and it goes that is me basically for the last 30 years. It goes and sometimes I think or feel that there's maybe not enough space anymore to store all those images. But I wanted to come back actually to this thing of, do you trust what you see and how you see it? Do you see it I love researching for my movies. Research is really everything. Entire research, getting as deep into the subject as possible is key for my work. But the research begins already with taking or opening those shelves in the brain that are connected to what you might read in a script. So you just trying only to open the right drawers and taking those things out. But are they still true? Are they really relating to the subject? Maybe not. then I'm opening the laptop and then I'm starting there. But what Google brings me, or other search engines, are those images actually true? Are they not pre-curated for me to look at? And I give you an example with the First World War thing. I mean, all the images you see on Google are, which I didn't know when I first opened Google and to look at them, they are all staged photographs. But they actually don't look, in the perception we look at them like 1917, they don't look staged for us. They look like somebody took a photo by coincidence in a trench. But as more I collected and collected, I saw the similarity or the pattern in those. And saying that can't be right. So through more research, then I found out that those photos were only produced for the public in newspapers to tell them a hero story about war. I think, yes. And so I started not trusting those images. And only by going, again, traveling, going all over Europe, deep down into archives, suddenly I then found images that were basically standing behind those other images and showed me, I don't know the truth, maybe not, but for sure suddenly I saw dead bodies, complete destroyed landscapes till the horizon, and those images and images of very, very devastated and destroyed soldiers, and that Google did not show that to me. So plus a lot of them were old glass plate photographs, and they were like 4K. That's development. So that just like brings me really to the thing that where do you take the way you see images? Are those images true? Are they pre-curated? Do I believe what I see? I think that's a big subject.
And Christian, you felt like that helped your storytelling as well, right? Finding those images because that connected to the message of your film?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is also discussing those or showing those images to the director really influenced the rewriting of the script till the version we shot. And I think through those images, we managed to filter even the slightest moment of heroic storytelling out of the script, because those images were so devastating that even the director kind of saying, okay, there's still this little microcosm here which could relate to a hero story, and he just crossed it out.
Can I add something to that? Because I love that, and that rings so true to me, and we talked about this before on Zoom. And it was, if you Google Agoji, which was the fighting female force from Dahomey in the 1800s in West Africa, you'll see these images that people take as truth. And as I'm reading texts from the kingdom, none of it is ringing true. And I'm seeing elements in there that wouldn't have been in the kingdom, but I was open to it. It turns out that in 1900, there was a World's Fair where they brought in Africans from Western Africa and dressed them up behind a fence in the middle of Paris. And those black and white photographs became the Agoji. So over and over again in the announcement of the film, when people would do limited research, they would Google Agoji, find those 3 or 4 images and put them out as the definition of a time and a place. And as you do history, and I feel like Jack and I talked about this last time, you see over and over again that changing of history that we accept, where the story of the winners becomes the story of which we can access, and then that becomes the fact of which we perpetuate. So we find ourselves sometimes after the fact observing untruths of which everybody holds as truth, and then having to debate with yourself as if I can even introduce the truth without getting pushback and being accused of having introduced an untruth. And one more example of that is I was doing 70s, 80s, 90s over different years of Harlem in New York City, different projects. And I kept seeing such a difference between photographers from the neighborhood and photographers who are visiting the neighborhood. If you're visiting the neighborhood, you have a perspective of which you'll find a true image that represents your perspective. And oftentimes your perspective is, those people are different than me. So now I'm going to search for the abandoned lot with a white Barbie doll and a burning trash can. That's the image I'm going to seek out. So I will walk by beautiful children in church clothes and elders, holding court with each other. I'll walk by that because that's not of interest to me. What's of interest to me is the drastic difference from my neighborhood to your neighborhood. And I'll publish a whole book of true images of which don't speak at all to the truth of the neighborhood. And then when you juxtapose that with someone who loves his neighborhood, all of a sudden, for the first time, you're seeing pictures of elders who have sweet wrinkles that look like your grandmother. And you're seeing sweetness and love and warmth, all the things of which was not of interest to that outside perspective.
In one example, the example for me would be Narcos. It's kind of the opposite of what was happened to both of you, because when I was reading the script, I was always thinking, like, why is he being idolized? Like, I don't want to sell an image to the world that Pablo Escobar was a rock star, no? Like, when I read, and I read it many times, I was like, there's something here that is weird. Like, I can't just go ahead, and I have a responsibility with my country, with my society, with the history of, like, I don't want to go and sell this character as the coolest person in the world. That I told you the story about MBS, the Prince Crown of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. They invited me to Riyadh because, like, in the invitation, in the email was like, how is this possible that a woman from Latin America created this amazing masculine world that is so cool? I was like, and I went. And I said, like, listen, these stories connected to all of us. And I wanted to do it realistic. I wanted it to be well art director, well designed. So instead of, like, just, they wanted to do the scene of, like, when Paulo, so this is like, it's a myth. Supposedly he flew a plane with the Rolling Stones for one party, and then he did flew a plane from Africa with the animals. All these stories, and they wanted to be very exaggerated. Like, let's make this character a god. Like, he can do anything. But then I said, maybe we should bring to the table magical realism, because that's something that happens in Colombia. It's like we're based on that book by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude. I said, magical realism is when something that it's happening is too weird to be believable, but it's so interesting. So I said, let's do that. Let's make it magical realism, but let's make it around him and not about him. So what I tried to do with Narcos was like being realistic, showing our country in a different way while I was telling a story that is, I mean, a scar for our society. But it was a big thing. And that happens not only in Narcos, but like I'm often, scripts come to me with these kinds of stories because this is what they're writing about. Like we're still in this stage that we're writing about kidnapping, violence. I've done many shows about that. And at the beginning it was like, why? But like, it's like, why is because I'm here and we have to tell the story. So now I'm now trying to change the narrative on how I tell this story. It's like, how can we say what Colombians are? Because we're not the rest of Latin America. We're Latins, but like each of us has a different way of seeing and a different way of how we see ourselves. And sometimes we're often seen like we're just one thing, like the stereotype that you've seen, like for many years, no? Like we're Mexican, we're all the same, like, but so we're not, and like I'm trying to fight that all the time when I receive the script. It's like there is a lot of other things that we can tell through art, through the design.
So what do you think are practices that could help us sort of break through the conventions that sometimes we bring to the table inadvertently or society does? You mentioned deep research and sort of getting off Google image search. What are other practices that you feel like help you, even just in your own mental process, push your, let's say, visual boundaries?
I mean, I would say, first of all, that there are not so many boundaries. That's a nice thing. I mean, I often ask myself, like, what responsibility do we have of what we are creating? Because that is also an image, a moving one, but. And we have recipients, people who look at those images, and is what we present true? I mean, depending for sure on the story. I mean, but is there a certain kind of responsibility in that? I don't know. I mean, if you look at how Fort Knox was presented in Goldfinger, I mean, generations really saw that what they saw there in that beautiful Ken Adams design was actually Fort Knox. It looked beautiful. I mean, it's fantastic for the showdown, but it's something that never existed. But that was Fort Knox for at least 2 decades. And my recent project now is a true story and a very tragic one. And there's a whole documentary being shot about it already. And now we're doing the fiction one. On top of that, not only that this storytelling is completely enhanced, otherwise people could also watch the documentary. Well, what do I do then? Do I just, I mean, there's all the imagery. I mean, you don't even have to do research. You just have to look at the original images. It's all there. It's documented, outtakes, 3,000 photographs. It's all there. Delivered to you by the documentary filmers and actually the people, the protagonists that really lived through that story, and they say, Here, Christian. So, what do you design? Do I just try to produce replicas of it? Do I do what I always try to do, design around characters and hence the emotions of the characters? But if I would do that, I would in that case, be not true to the material anymore. So basically, I have to leave the research behind in that way. And but what would the people think who kind of really lived through that story when they suddenly see a design that is not has nothing to do with what really surrounded them? Well, I can tell you, I did it like I always did it, is like being true to the character and enhance a character in a space. It's like, the story takes place in original in 2016. They're young people, 20 years old, living in a shared household, not call it squat, but it's like, and the research, the original material, I mean, that's the smallest example of that movie, but I like it very much. It's like, basically, the information that was given to me, it was white spaces with white wallpaper with a 95% IKEA dressing. All right. It's like, I mean, not that would be, you know, very charming for the scope eye, but also it tells nothing about the character. And then my own memory comes back to mind. It's like all those shared households in the 90s in Berlin, you know, it's like it was cheap, you know, people, you know, spaces were vast, you could just like walk into them. No wallpapers, like scruffy, unplastered walls. There I could relate to. There I was knowing what I was doing. There I knew kind of how a character would walk. Is it true to the story? No. Does it come out of my memory? Yes. Is it the wrong period from my memory? Yes. So, but I would still paste, copy precisely that because I knew best. And I knew how to, out of my memory, could support the characters in that movie, and basically recreated the memory of a 90s shared apartment in Berlin. When our young actors and actresses came into that stage build, they would say to me, "Oh, this is how we ever imagined it." I think it's just like, it's also about the detail. If you just paste, copy it, it becomes cliche, and the cliche can be only broken up by just implemented as many details as possible. And yeah.
And I think, well, like what we were saying with the documentary photography, those people traveling to different neighborhoods and shooting things. What is truth? Is truth the guy that's shooting the elders and the children in the church clothes, or is truth the guy that's shooting empty lots with trash covered in it? It's the same neighborhood, it's just the perspective that you're choosing. So I think the baseline truth is non-existent because it's still storytelling by default. And those patterns, so then I think there's a broader truth too, you know, because obviously we all grapple with this. Do we do the IKEA room, or do we do the one with heart? And if we're capturing those actual children's heart, are we doing them a service by articulating their heart with the things we adorn around them as the representation of them? And I think yes. An example of that would be on When They See Us. I had a couple family photos from a couple of the men. I had access to the men. I had an audio recording from the director who had sat with them, and within the audio recordings, each man had talked about their childhood home. I chose not to engage with them directly about their memories of their home, because I felt that the project in itself was intrusive of their world. One of those men came into my office, saw pictures I had up representing his childhood. His name was Corey. Corey suffered. And Corey looked at the wall and he said, R.I.P., and kissed the child version of himself. Because he, so there was such a trauma attached to them that I chose not to show the world the specific details that they remember of themselves, but instead use what I knew of them to create it. And each one of them, when they came into the houses we built for them and saw their apartments and saw their childhood, they said, this is right. And it wasn't right because it was exact. It was right because we were paying attention to their energy and their pattern, and we were looking at them with respect and love. So truth, if I had pushed back on that, of course, it's not true. But their first feeling of experiencing it was, yes, this is true. So, I don't know. It's tricky. We grapple with it, especially with historical things, like we were saying before, is that the truth might be at odds with people's perception of the truth as well. So how do you balance that? But I do think we have an obligation for emotional truth. The truth that I weigh above all else is that we are all the same. That we all have the same feelings. That the most powerful thing that we wield is empathy and intimacy, to see each other in each other. And every time we don't do that, then we're liars. And then we are perpetuating a harmful untruth about your fellow neighbors and brothers and sisters.
So your question were like, what are you doing that things are different? Like, what is good for
Some
you?
practices you can share about how you can kind of go beyond
Yes.
or examine your instincts or the world around us.
So what's working for me lately, I've been thinking, is when they come to the first meeting with all the references, like there's always like, it's already written how they want it to look, no? From the producers, from the writers, even the director is like, you have homework, you have to see these 3 movies, and I want to see the color like this, and I want the set that is in this other movie. I want this theater to look exactly like this movie, but with these lamps from this movie, and then it's like, so what's working for me right now is to go see all those references and then try to just stay away, try to just like do the opposite, and go and look for the answer. It's like, okay, so if I was the writer and he's writing this scene and it's in the kitchen again, and I just read 3 other pages in the kitchen again, but when we are the location scout and then I see next to the kitchen there is a patio, or there is like, what I'm trying to do is staying away for the references and then come to the scouting location and say like, what if we try to go look the other way, and maybe we can use this set in this in a different way. I don't think these lamps really look good with this theater. It's a mix of things that I like. So what I'm trying to do is like challenge the process with the rest of the team, often with the help of the DP. Like I go, we have a conversation, and then it's difficult because they always want this image that they have, like they want to sell the show, like this is what we want, and then I'm like, so it's gonna look the same, like everything right now is looking the same. So how do you avoid to go into that same thing that you're scrolling in Netflix? It's like, oh, these look the same. It's like the posters even look the same. So that's the exercise that I'm doing right now too.
Yeah, I think just to add from my own experience that also gave birth to this panel is I recently worked with Pedro Almodovar for a really long time on a movie, and his design process is very instinctual, and the way he puts things together is kind of almost, to me, a little random, but he can't really explain why these things go together. He just sees them together. And my design process was a lot more rational, kind of going through character and saying, this person lives in New York, she works here, she makes this much money, this is her background, and therefore she will have this couch. But it kind of was irrelevant in that design process, or it only worked to a certain point. And so it really got me to question my process and say, how can I randomize my process a little more? And so that's sort of what I'm thinking about now. And I've been thinking a lot about, for example, the art of collage or Dada, Dada art movement, which is my favorite movement that was so much about chance. And how can we bring more elements in our design to be more chance-like rather than extremely thought out? So that's sort of why I'm gravitating. I don't know exactly what the practice of it is, but I think, you know, breaking our patterns is probably more connected with randomizing, scrambling our brain a little bit. I think we're going to open the floor to questions, and I also don't know what time it is. So if I don't know how long we have for questions, but if somebody wants to raise their hand, we have some mics in the audience, and we'll get to you with the mic. I see Rick in the back there. Thank you.
I was just struck on this panel. First of all, what a great opening panel it is. And I leaned over to Win, my fellow generational representative, along with Janine right here. And the comment that I had, Richard Silbert was both Win and my mentor, and at different times, but, or slightly different. And he was very philosophical. And he, I think, imbued us, and I think in our generation of growing up, there's been a development of this philosophical point of view that's been embedded somehow in some of these movies that have come out over the last few decades. So watching the four of you explore so deeply a point of view, and in the ways that you have, and what you bring to it both personally and societally, is quite a revelation. And I'm not sure that you can even understand that. Maybe the younger people who are coming in are getting from you what you got when you were looking at what you thought production design was or could be, but you're definitely taking it, and have been taking it, into a new realm that I feel very, very, well, I'm trying to think what the difference is, but I think the difference being aspirational is something you right away are going to think you're going to almost do like it's ambitious, whereas inspirational is a way of going deep inside and finding something, but then having a responsibility with the imagery that you create. But I think it's great the way you've started.
Thank you. Thanks, Rick. Any other comments, questions? Let's see Christy over there.
Thank you. I loved hearing your thought processes, all of them, because it all winds up being about what is the final decision that you make after the process of absorbing, whether it's research or the reality of a story that you're trying to then, quote unquote, fictionalize. At what point do you, in your mind, say, this is it?
Still haven't. To believe, yeah, you know, to feel, to believe. I do think some of it for me is you jump off the cliff at some point. Because I love opening a door that opens another door that opens another door, and that is a fun exploration that I know I can't spend all my time doing. So at some point I understand that I appreciate what we will do now. And I feel like the other people, other creators around me will also appreciate it. Are there other versions that I may appreciate more? Absolutely. But this particular version, I believe in, and I believe enough in that I can share it. So at that point, I'll know that I've gotten to that point, and sometimes I push push further. But I know I kind of exhale when I get to the point where I'm like, it's there, and now what happens next is extra, or not necessary, or talking to a smaller and smaller group of people, where like if I could do this a little bit better, then 6 more people would be like, damn, that was amazing, you know?
I feel like when like the script finds you, you get in a, like you decide if you're going to do it because you're gonna get you're gonna go into a like very deep, intimate relationship with the script, like with that time that you're gonna give all to it. Like I completely immerse in the time. Like I become that. I start seeing about this subject everywhere, and like I think this is it, this is the moment. It's not only the same time when we start shooting. Sometimes I need more time, sometimes I find the connection very early, and it's like, oh, this is it. Like I'm going to go this direction. It's like I fell in love with this project at this moment. I felt it, like now I'm in love, I can go a piece and do it, and then sometimes it's harder because sometimes it's like breaking out too, no? Like sometimes the scripts are very personal, or the production didn't go well, or something happened, and it's like, this is not it. Like I really, like this was not for me. And so now, more and more, I think, like, do I want to get involved in this relationship? This script is a relationship. It has personality. It has, like, it's good things and bad things are going to come through you. So this is it or this is not. Like, I try to just make better decisions now.
I think the final end to just saying this is it is if somebody in the room says rolling. It's like sure, I mean, you try to be true to your first idea or whatever, but I think that, what makes it so special, what we do, is we do it under time pressure. Yeah, so it's creativity with a ticking clock. Yeah. So, and there are stages in, before somebody says rolling, there are stages of decision making. If you're referring to my personal, this is it. It's basically the kind of the end of a design process that gives a broader picture of one space. But then comes so many collaboratives, that like the struggle or the love to one sofa from set decoration side, the silver patined lighter from the prop department, those with and then comes the light, then comes a lot of light. It's just like, so when does it stop? It never does till it's basically shot. And I think that the nice thing is that we don't, see and paint this canvas alone. It's a collaborative work, and there are so many people with so many brushes, bigger ones, smaller ones, and they paint this canvas, and only when that canvas is basically completely filled through so many people and somebody points it at the audience, I think then you can say this is it.
And I guess we never discussed, which is a good follow-up question, is sharing those images with a director, and when does it actually then become a shared vision with the director? Does everybody accept those images, therefore you're set, and so on, and how does your vision get realigns with the director's, or then is enriched by the director's imagery. So that's kind of a follow-up conversation. Sure, when does the process end, but also where does it then take on everybody else's input, but mostly the director's? Do you guys start out showing images to the director early on? Or when do you decide to show the images to the director?
We've talked about this because we have different perspectives. I like long-winded philosophical conversations. But I like to describe fabric and touch and sense. I like having long conversations where there's no images attached to it. And oftentimes when a director sends me images, I'll put them to the side and tell them that I'm choosing to just talk with you first because I want to see unattached. And I want to get to know you, and I want to push past visuals to like, what is it that you're trying to communicate at each juncture? So I'll do like little emotional beats when I read a script written next to it, like super simple. I think many people have their own version of that, but mine are broken down into like love, sadness, embarrassment, awkwardness, so that I'm always keeping track of this base feeling that is attached to that world. And then that helps me with directors because when he's or she is talking about some yellow velvet couch, it's gotta be this yellow velvet couch, then I'm understanding that as this is the emotional beat for this child that represents sadness. So what I can now interpret possibly from this director is he or she has this connection to that color, that place, and sadness. And so then you can ask them that question, was there something with this yellow velvet couch and your memory of feeling sad? And oftentimes, they don't realize that they have that connection with it. So now you've gotten to a route that is a more useful tool for you to create with, because rather than scrambling around and your decorator sending you images of some couch and they're going, that's not the couch. But as we know, we don't always have that freedom to be able to not. Right? Inbal, do you have a story like that?
My Petra's blue couch with red piping.
I think depending on the director, but I like to dilute it. Like I try to push sending him or she things. Like I like the show and tells. I like to invite them to the office. I'm like, do you want to come to the art department office? Because they sometimes get very anxious. They're like, when are you showing me something? Like when are you? I'm like, relax, I'm doing it. It's gonna happen. But why don't you come to the office and we can discuss? Because we have like our walls with our references, but like with the real things, like the buyers start like, this is the 5 lamps that you wanted, and this is the one that is like the one that we cannot get because it's too expensive, and then that's the one that he decides to get. So I invite them to come and try to sit down, have a coffee with me at the art department. Like that's what I don't like sending things. It makes me nervous. So I want more like one-on-one conversations with, and often the directors are friends with me. Like I've been lucky that I've been working with many friends, so we know each other. So it's like, remember that thing that when we were together over there, like this is what I want. I'm like, okay, you got it. No, it's sometimes it's easy but I don't like to be like sending things through the process. I wait, I push it as long as I can till the show and tell, sometimes.
I mean, the ways of seeing, I mean, it's like who are you dealing with? Which director are you dealing with? I mean, we're the psychoanalysts of a production, and so also looking at the director, you have to decide of what kind of how you present to the director. It's like I worked with directors who couldn't even read a ground floor plan, So is it does it make sense to present a ground floor plan to somebody who can't read a ground floor plan? I don't think so. Sometimes I made entire movie just talking to the director. We didn't discuss any single image. I worked with directors who kind of just say to me, okay, on that green wall, like 25 centimeters from the left corner, I want a little poo of a fly. So. And I work with directors who say, I have no clue how this whole thing will look like. So I think that's how you present things or don't to a director. It's a different story every time. And do we need just like whole walls of plastered concepts? Sometimes, yes. Do we need like has a canvas to be completely wide in order to dive emotionally deeper into the story? Or maybe that's the way of the director thinking? Yes. So there's I can't give you the answer to a general ruling there.
But maybe my understanding of your question, because I think all this is true, but was when you're meeting on a film, is that what you were asking?
I'm just intrigued by everybody's different processes.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
no.
Because I love that process of our job, which that each time we're learning how to communicate with a drastically different human being, and how do you do that? Like that jumping through hoops is amazing. And how do you do that visually? My answer was to, when you're going in for a meeting, which is so interesting because I feel like the process as it exists today for many designers is that you're in competition with other designers. And the request oftentimes is that you submit blindly a vision of which aspects of it, regardless of if you get the job or not, will probably end up in that film, to the director and the producer of the film, so they can sit through a pile of talented, beautiful imagery from many wonderful designers, and then be inspired and choose one of those people, which, or be sitting across from the perfect designer for their film, who could fully create their vision, but has, for whatever reason, put a bunch of images that aren't their vision because you're doing it in the dark. So this idea, so I love to do that, but I also get precious in that process. And so pushing the process out to after meeting the director, where now I can use my knowledge of what's important to them to now create imagery that speaks to it, to me is a more valuable process because I don't want to fall in love with just my version of their film by putting together an immense, beautiful deck that speaks to only my vision of it in a vacuum. Does that make sense?
Yeah, interesting. I have a different perspective on it, actually, because I feel like the interview process is naturally flawed and that you're never really going to get the full sense of your director by just meeting with them, even for a few hours. And so I actually feel like my bringing in the images that were those instinctual images is my grounding anchor. As in, if we see those images, if we both see them, then at least that's what we have in common, so that if all else fails, I still know that I see this person's movie in my head as well. So actually, I feel like whenever I got a job, it was probably because my images were the closest to what the director was saying in their mind. And then often the job would go, like, in terms of the relationship, a completely different way than what I thought in the interview it would go, but the vision kind of stays the same.
So for me, like, I think I often do just one image or something, like I try to, but then in the interview or when I'm interviewing with the director and producers, I try to be very honest and to create like an environment of trust, very early. I think like if they feel you're trustable with one image, it says more than like a lot of images. Like, I think being honest for me has worked more than try to achieve the perfect thing that they have in their minds, because it's impossible for me to guess.
Any other question? I see Alex out there.
Thank you all for sharing. I suppose dreams are sort of tied to what we do inherently, but my question is there a specific moment or moments where your dreams have sort of answered a question or directly affected your work? And the second part of the question is, do any of you have a way of recording your dreams? Is that a habit, or do you have a way of kind of capturing that vision?
I love this question so much, thank you. I'll just start chatting until you remember your dreams. I also think dreams are really inspiring, and in fact, I don't know if you know Fellini's book, The Book of Dreams, which is an incredible source of inspiration, which is really a facsimile of all of Fellini's dreams over maybe 30 years, which he recorded and illustrated himself. It's a huge book, and I have it on my bedside table at all times for inspiration. I wish my dreams were like Fellini's dreams. But I also actually wanted to mention that the director that I work with often, Derek Cianfrance, he uses an acting coach that does dream work for his actors and also for himself. And her process is that she works with the actors and the director's dreams to connect them to the storytelling of the film, and they bring their insight, sometimes even into the art department's universe, which I find that so incredible and super intriguing. I personally can't say that I record my dreams or that my dreams are connected necessarily to my process, but I can say that the hardest design zone that I was ever in is when I was working on Suspiria, and we had to design the underworld where our witches lived. And it was a very, very difficult process versus the sort of day-to-day 1970s Berlin, which it's like I almost saw it in my mind's eye. And that was the moment where I really realized that my imagination is limited and started thinking of how to push the limits of my imagination. And in the end, we kind of found our inspiration in a lot of performance art and installation art from the 1970s, and that kind of helped me find a practice to enrich my non-existent imagination, which is look for the people who live there, look for the artists who live in that world, and just observe the work they do. So find the most cutting-edge art, the most intriguing, the art that I don't understand, very psychological artists, like Louise Bourgeois, for example. She was so versed in connecting her dreams and her subconscious with her art. And so learning from those artists, that's kind of my way of connecting dreams. Perhaps they're not mine, but they're someone more exciting than me.
I don't think it comes from dreams necessarily, but sometimes the ideas or the solutions, they come at night. Like I wake up and then I'm like, okay, I got it. And then I have to write down, and I write down, and it comes. And I don't know if this is like something that I just dreamt, because I don't remember a lot of my dreams. The ones that are connected with work, definitely not. But I know I dreamt something, and then I wake up and I have to like sketch or like write down. I know it's connected, but I'm not reliving the dream. I've experimented with some other ways of seeing, like visions of ayahuasca, for example. And that I can write down and I can see, and I connect, and sometimes then I see other worlds that are inside of me that are not necessarily connected to the job, but it's definitely a way of seeing, another way of seeing that sometimes works with process, helps.
I think, and this may be the unromantic version, but I think I listened to this Radio Lab many years ago, and it was about dreams. And they took a mouse or a rat, and they had him run the same maze over and over again. And when he dreamt the exact same maze. And they observed his brain, so the brain is doing the exact same things. Then they had him run 2 different mazes, and when he dreamt an amalgamation of those 2 mazes. And I know that we've all experienced that, where you'd work something in repetition, and then you dream the exact same thing, and you're like, was I working all day? Again, I went to sleep to go to work. But I think when you dream that amalgamation, all those other pieces are lost of it. So your brain is deleting all the things. Actually, I listened to a neurologist on consciousness and Charlie Kaufman have a discussion that was fascinating. And I won't bore you with all that, but if you can find it. It was at the World Science Festival. It was incredible, incredible. But I think we're shaving, we're deleting all these things that are weighing us down, and we're highlighting in the course of our day, our conscious mind is saying, this is a value, and all the things that are not tagged with value slowly get swept, and the more distance you have from those things, the more that they're swept. So what you're left with is all these kind of unrooted flags of value from your entire life. And so most of the ones of importance to you are the ones at that moment in time are the ones that are closest to you. But every once in a while, you get these flags from the distance that pop back up. And so your dream is this whole little warped vision of all of these things that are gaining new value or once had value to you, which I find so fascinating. So I do think that a part of me just thinks in dreams, because when I describe that, that's kind of how my brain, my conscious brain, is thinking. Very fabric in the wind, like, where I allow my freedom of, I think I respect that fluidity. I don't try to control it. I allow myself to be as open to it as possible. So to answer your question, no, I don't really have, my dreams are either always with me or not important to me at all, if that makes any sense.
I think as I can't put my dreams in any of those shelves I described, I kind of, no, I don't have a dream book, but I try to pass my dreams on to my children and try to inspire them, and hopefully they will develop kind of their own ways of seeing out of those.
Beautiful, and on that note, we're going to end our first panel. Thank you so much for dreaming with us.